All right, friends, so this is a story that most of my friends don't even know, and I can already feel my chest tightening. I'm going to talk about the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me, which is honestly saying a lot because a lot of traumatic things have happened to me in my life, unfortunately. I think if I'd recorded this video a month or two ago, I would already be sobbing. I have been working very hard in therapy on this traumatic experience. I have been doing written exposure therapy, and I have finished that written exposure therapy. And so now we are going kind of into the aftermath of that. But I finally feel ready to share this story, talk about it more. I think that this is really important for me to share this story to help me process it. And the more I talk about the story, the more I feel my chest release and the pressure come off of me a little bit. The weight that I have been carrying since I was 10.5 years old when this happened gets a little lighter. So that's why I really want to share this story with you all today. I think I'm also going to do a written part of the story and release it on my Substack, so go check that out. I will link that below. This story starts, like I said, when I was 10.5 years old. Actually, as I was going through therapy, I thought I was older. I thought I was like 12, but no, I was just a baby. This basically is a story of how I saved my mom's leg. If I had not been there, she probably most likely would have had her leg amputated. So what happened was, we were at my house here and my mom went down into the basement to look for something. Both my mom and I have compared memories. We don't really remember a lot of the details. So she doesn't remember what she went downstairs to look for. She just went into our garage. I went outside around the house and was outside of the garage because I wanted to show her something in the woods. So she was going down in the basement to look for something. And the next thing I knew, I heard a really big thump, and then I started hearing my mom screaming. This is where the chest starts to tighten, because this is my biggest PTSD to this day, is hearing screaming. I will just hear screaming, especially when it's really windy. I will pause, kind of freeze, and be like, oh my god, does somebody need help? Do they need saving? And this goes back to 10.5-year-old Sierra. So I heard my mom screaming, and she started screaming my name. And the garage doors were locked, so I was like, what's wrong? What's going on? What's wrong? She was like, you have to come. So then I ran all the way around the house and back through the house and into our basement and then into our garage, not knowing what was wrong. And I remember it was super bright outside, so as I ran into the very dark garage, we only had one light on at the time, my eyes took a while to adjust. I actually remember pausing. There was a door between our basement and our garage, and I remember pausing just for like a half second, because I think in that moment I knew my life was about to change. And I didn't know what was on the other side of that door, and I was really scared. And so I opened the door, and like I said, my eyes took a while to adjust. It was very dimly lit, and I remember seeing dust in the air. And I didn't know what the dust was from. I couldn't see my mom for a while, and then she was like, over here, over here. And so what had happened was 14 sheets of plywood had fallen onto my mom down the side of her leg and pinned her leg under these 14 sheets. One of her feet, kind of like her ankle-ish area. And so my mom was on the ground trying to put pieces of wood that was by her, that she could find, anything she could find, honestly, under this so that it would stop crushing her leg. And I remember being like, I need to find the hand truck. We had a hand truck. We probably recently used it, that it was like fresh in my mind. I was like, I need to find the hand truck. And I remember having to go to the back of the garage to turn on more lights because I could not see anything. It's very pitch black in there without all the lights on. I found the hand truck. I remember wheeling it over. I think it took 2 tries because I was 10.5. I was this tiny kid, and I don't think I had enough of my body weight behind it at first for my mom to drag her leg off. So I'm pretty sure it took 2 tries, and then she had to pull her leg out, and then she was like, go call your dad. And so I have no memory of her dragging herself from our garage into our basement. The next memory I have is her at the bottom of our stairs to go to our first floor, and I was 10.5 years old. I was not big enough to help like carry my mom, so my mom was literally dragging herself. I don't remember what I said to my dad. I have no memory of any of that. I think I gave the phone to my mom so she could say what was going on. Then I remember my mom dragging herself up the stairs to our first floor. And she basically sat on a chair at the top of the stairs, and we didn't know how bad the damage was. We didn't know if my mom's leg was broken. We didn't know how bad the tissue damage was. We just did not know what was going on. And so then we waited for 20 minutes for my dad to drive home from work to take us to the urgent care. And so I think that was a really scary amount of time for me as a kid, because again, we did not know what was happening and how much damage there was. This is what's crazy. My memory is my mom sat in the front of the car with her leg elevated. My mom was like, no, I couldn't do that. I had to lay down in the back of our van. We had a Sienna at the time. She said she had to lay down in the back of the van and elevate her foot, or it was too painful. I have no memory of that. I mean, that memory is literally gone. And so we went to the urgent care, and I pretty much have no memories from urgent care either. So a lot of this is like from what my mom and dad have told me. But they ended up doing x-rays and there was nothing broken, which was insane. Another saving grace was that my mom was wearing really heavy rubber rain boots, like gardening boots, that as the plywood slid down her leg and got like to the, you know, from the knee down in her leg, it hit the boots, and so it slid on this rubber boot. Otherwise, I think it would have just taken some of the ligaments and the tendons with it as it slid down. Basically, they said that was another thing that helped to save her foot, was that she was like wearing not just like sandals or something, but this really heavy duty rubber, which helped to slow the scrape and then how bad the crush was as well. Did the x-rays, nothing was broken, which was insane. We really thought something was broken. So it was all tissue damage, but we did not know how bad the tissue damage was. My mom was supposed to fly back to Wisconsin a couple days after that, and she was like, can I fly with this? Because we just did not know how bad this was. And they were like, oh yeah, you can fly. So then the next day we go to my mom's PCP, my mom's primary care doctor, and she tried to listen for a pulse in my mom's foot, and she could not find a pulse. And so she said, you need to go to the emergency room right now and have an ultrasound done to make sure you have circulation in your foot. And so I have no memory of that because I was dropped off at a family friend's house. And so I did not go to the emergency room with my parents. Then they did find a pulse in my mom's foot, which was good. However, then my mom had to go to months of PT, and my mom and I just had a conversation about this. Her physical therapist did not tell her that when she first came in and for several weeks after, he thought that she was gonna lose her leg. Why is this part getting me? Wow. Because of how bad her circulation was, and because of a lack of pulse and because of a lack of blood flow. And when you have a lack of blood flow to a limb, gangrene can set in, and then you can legitimately have tissue death. And then you have to amputate that body part so it doesn't spread and kill you, is my understanding. And the physical therapist did not tell us this at the beginning. He told us this months later. And so we did not know how bad the tissue damage was. When my mom went to the emergency room, not the urgent care, but the emergency room after they couldn't find the pulse, they said, oh, you can't fly. That would be really bad with the pressure change. You cannot fly with this level of tissue damage. It's such a catch-22. I think if the physical therapist had told us that, we would have treated it a lot differently and a lot more seriously. We did not know, again, like I said, how serious it was. We could have prepared ourselves for, oh my God, my mom might lose her leg. That's insane. We need to kind of know that. But at the same time, then that really starts to freak you out and you start to spiral. And in some ways, I think it was good that we didn't know that. And my mom just kind of went through her, you know, recovery, not expecting that or not even knowing that that was a possibility. So it's really this catch-22, us not knowing that she could have lost her leg and how serious and how scary that was. And so then I just remember months of physical therapy, and I was homeschooled growing up, so I went to a lot of my mom's physical therapy at that time. And I remember her telling so many people, like, she was on crutches, so she obviously had an injury. And I remember her telling, oh, this is getting me too, emotions are good. I'm trying to let them out of my body. So it's okay that I'm telling the story and emotions are coming out, because that is what's supposed to happen. I need to keep reminding myself of that. I remember my mom telling a lot of people, my daughter is my hero. Like, she saved my leg. She saved me. And I remember being 10 and a half apparently. And I remember being like embarrassed and just like, I don't want to talk about it. Like I didn't tell anyone. I was not in therapy that time. I was not talking about it at all. And so to me, it was like, stop bringing it up. Don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about this. I understand, like she was really grateful, you know, that I had been there, and she ended up not losing her leg. She ended up making a full recovery. My mom doesn't even have a limp to this day. I limp more than my mom. And so that is the good part, is that she did not lose her leg. And so she did make a full recovery. I don't know why, I just didn't want to talk about it. And so when my mom would bring this up, being like, this is my hero, she saved me, and then she would tell the story, and I just like did not want to hear about it at all. Which makes sense from a trauma perspective. I was completely shut down. I was completely dissociated. And unfortunately, what this led to as a 10-year-old without processing this was a huge sense of responsibility. So through therapy, I figured out that like I became a mini adult overnight. I developed hyper-vigilance from this, where I 24/7 was like, oh, I need to be prepared for an emergency because this can happen. It basically took away my innocence as a child. And I realized that, oh, accidents can happen. Your parents are not these, you know, people who nothing can happen to. Like at any time, anything can happen, and you need to be prepared for that, is what I learned. And if you know internal family systems and parts work, I have a video actually on internal family systems if you want to go check that out. I just this last week met one of my firefighters, and her name is Little Sierra. She developed from this trauma, the hypervigilance, the hyper responsibility, the needing to be on 24/7 so that she would never be taken off guard again, because she wasn't ready for this. She wasn't prepared. And so in a lot of ways, she became this hyper prepared little kid. And just like that, I lost my childhood, and I kind of became this responsible, serious little kid who everybody was like, oh my gosh, you're so, you know, mature for your age. And it was like, no, that's trauma. That is trauma. And autism. I would say that's autism too. But it completely changed my life, my world. I had severe PTSD from this. Like I said, I was constantly hearing screaming, and it was really scary. And so, I mean, I started developing nightmares as well, and intrusive thoughts of just accidents happening and me needing to like be aware of all the possibilities of things happening. And so this is part 1 of my story. I'm actually going to do a part 2 because several weeks later, the second kind of part of this trauma compounded on this trauma. We ended up having to go to the emergency room. We thought my mom had a stroke. That was kind of in my mind connected to this because it was so freaking scary. So I'm going to talk about that in the next video. Thanks for being here. This is like a very vulnerable story for me to share because it was so raw, so traumatic, and I've never talked about this with like even many of my friends. So you're my friends now, and thank you for listening, and stay tuned for part 2 coming out next week, where I talk about the other most stressful, traumatic thing happened to me a few weeks after this accident. So see you in that video. Bye, friends.